newest episode of the History Podcast.
Today we're diving into 4 new topics, like...
Laika!
Excuse me, I was talking.
God forbid I be excited about our episode. Jeez.
Anyways, we'll get into the second part of the Odyssey, Joseph Mengele, and finishing off with Henry VIII.
Going through time, I see.
And all around the world. First off, we're kickstarting in Russia, or as it was known, the USSR.
Welcome to the segment of the History Podcast. Now, fellow podcasters, I'd like to ask you all, what's your favourite animal?
I like
I like cats too.
Did I hear you say dogs?
No.
Oh. Well, my point is, today we're going to be discussing a very special dog. We're talking about Laika.
But, sorry, who was Laika?
For some context, Laika is best known as the dog who got sent to space. She was the first animal to ever orbit the Earth.
Oh yeah, didn't the USSR send her up on Sputnik too?
They did. She was straight off the street of Moscow.
Fun fact, they selected 3 dogs to train, all of which were strays. They thought they would be better suited to the extreme cold and lack of food.
That's horrible.
Okay, yeah, maybe fun wasn't the right word.
Wait, who's they? Who would want to send a dog up to space?
They refers to a group of Soviet scientists, but in reality it was Khrushchev, the USSR's leader at the time, who wanted to send a dog to space. Coming off the high of the first functioning satellite, Sputnik 1's success, Khrushchev aimed to launch another spacecraft on the 7th of November 1957, and this was to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the last part of the Russian Revolution, called the October Revolution.
Also, Soviet scientists were keen to send a canine into orbit. A few animals had been sent into suborbit before, but it would be seriously impressive to prove mammals could survive in space.
However, they only made the decision to launch Sputnik 2 4 weeks before the deadline, so it was extremely rushed.
Because of this work on Sputnik 2 began immediately, it was 4 meters high, 500 kilogram, cone-shaped capsule. It had 3 parts, the top part and middle part with transmitters and batteries like its predecessor Sputnik 1, and a cargo cabin at the bottom for Laika. There's that food, temperature controls, an oxygen generator, and a window. She had a window? That's so cute.
Well, unfortunately, the process was anything but cute. To train the dogs, they had to keep them in progressively smaller cages, which was obviously harmful to their health and well-being.
10 days before the launch, they made the decision that out of the 3 dogs trained, Laika was to be sent to space.
Oh, I have something to add. Apparently, the night before her launch, one of the scientists took her home and spot her rotten.
Speaking of, one of the technicians preparing the capsule before final liftoff even stated, after placing Laika in the container and before closing the hatch, we kissed her on the nose and wished her bon voyage, knowing she would not survive the flight. What do you mean, knowing she wouldn't survive this flight? Did I miss something?
Oh God, we forgot to say, they never expected Laika to survive. Sputnik 2 was a rushed job due to time pressure, and they hadn't yet developed the technology to re-enter the atmosphere. Laika was never meant to live.
That makes this a lot more tragic.
So a voyage began. Sputnik was designed in 3 sections, and those sections could come apart. After going into orbit, the nose cone was shed, but one section didn't separate properly.
This messed up with the temperature control, and the cabin temperature rose around to 40 degrees.
After 7 hours, no sign of life was received. The USSR had successfully sent a dog into orbit, but at what cost?
They had planned to euthanize her with a dose of poison food, but obviously that wasn't needed in the end. So, what happened after? Surely people found out.
For many years, the Soviet Union gave conflicting statements that she had died either from asphyxia when the batteries failed, or that she had been euthanized. Rumors circulated.
Finally, in October 2002, Dmitry Meleshchenkov, one of the scientists behind the Sputnik 2 mission, revealed that Laika had died by the forced circuit of the flight from overheating.
That can't be it, right? Did nobody care that they killed this poor dog?
Well, this all took place in the midst of the space race of the Cold War. The USSR's media was heavily censored, so nothing in opposition could be said there, and the USA focused mainly on the political side to this, not Laika's health.
In 1998, after the collapse of the Soviet regime, Oleg, one of the scientists responsible for sending Laika into space, expressed regret for allowing her to die, saying, "Work with animals is a source of suffering to us all. We treat them like babies who cannot speak. The more time passes, the more I'm sorry about it. We shouldn't have done it. We did not learn enough from this mission to justify the death of the dog."
Gosh, this is morbid.
It is, but Laika is at least remembered by millions. She even has a statue.
Also, she contributed a lot to science. Without her, we wouldn't have been able to get a man to the moon as soon as we did.
Well, hang on, yes, she was important, but she was also innocent. I'm sure we could have got a man to space without harming an animal.
Don't forget to consider the context. This was during the height of the arms race in the Cold War. I'm sure Khrushchev just wanted to be seen as powerful and to beat the USA and all that. Nobody's saying it's good.
Look, this can't be defined by one label. In my opinion, it's horrible what they did to Laika, no doubt about it. Even if it did help get a man to space and jumpstart many scientific discoveries, they could have achieved it without the animal abuse. However, no matter how immoral it happened, and now, because of Laika, we're less approving of animal harm just for human gain.
Yeah, actually,
Yeah,
point's really good.
Laika's life was tragic and unfairly cut short, but at least she went on in spirit to inspire art all around the world.
I think it's beautiful that people celebrated her life since its unfortunate end. Listeners, before we go, I'd like to leave you with an excerpt from a poem about Laika called First Dog in Space by Brennan Davies. They say that from space the Earth looks like a small blue ball. I'll throw it for you, Laika, if you'll chase it.
I guess we better wrap this up.
Fatia, would you like to give us a recap?
Oh yeah, of course. So Laika was the first dog to be sent into orbit. And she was a stray off the streets of Moscow trained for outer space. The scientists running the experiment picked strays because they thought they'd be better suited to the extreme cold and hunger.
Do you remember why the mission went so wrong?
Well, there were multiple reasons, but primarily because Sputnik 2 was a rushed job.
And why?
It was rushed because Khrushchev wanted to get something out for the 40th anniversary of the last part of the Russian Revolution. After the success of Sputnik 1, he figured sending a living creature into orbit would be the next step of Soviet success.
What effect did this have on her voyage?
The ship didn't separate properly, and that messed with the temperature control. Cabin temperatures rose to 40 degrees. After 7 hours, no more signs of life were received by the technicians.
How was this dealt with?
There were conflicting statements given about her whereabouts by Soviet media teams. Rumors circulated.
How did the public receive this? It was obviously
Unethical, I know, but there was little to no criticism until decades later. The USSR was heavily censored, so nothing could be said there, and the USA focused on the political aspect due to the ongoing Cold War and the arms race between the USA and the USSR. Only years later, after the collapse of the Soviet regime, did any of the scientists even express their regret over killing Laika in their pursuit.
I guess we're done.
Thank you for listening. This episode is dedicated to Laika, the bravest dog in the world.
Bye!
Get a grip.
It's so sad.
So, anyways, here's the second part of the Odyssey series.
Alright, my watchers, listen closely. Tonight we make the Trojans pay.
Ace, shut up. But hello there, pods, and welcome back to another slot in the podcast, written and produced by us, or
The Greek Geeks. And you want to know who made up the name? Me. So you can thank me for the name. You're welcome.
Anyways, today we are carrying on with our mini-series on the Odyssey.
And surely this time we will talk about how it all began, right? You know, with like the whole Trojan War and
No.
What?
Today we are speaking of Telemachus' journey to search for his father. Chapter 3 of the Odyssey, Telemachus arrives at Pylos to speak with Nestor. Currently there is a feast going on as they sacrifice cattle to Poseidon. Nestor greets Telemachus with open arms, and Telemachus asks about his father. Nestor can explain everyone's fate, from Menelaus being able to return home to Agamemnon being killed by his wife's lover, I'm probably going to butcher the name, Aegisthus, who was then slain later on by Agamemnon's son, Orestes. However, Nestor has no idea what happened to Odysseus. Telemachus rests in Nestor's castle and is taken away on a carriage with Nestor's son, Pisistratus, to Sparta to meet Menelaus, favourite of Zeus. In chapter 4 of the Odyssey, Telemachus travels to Sparta to talk with Menelaus. Menelaus explains how he was taken off course and washed up on the shores of Egypt. He was told by Eidothea to capture Proteus, a god. Menelaus and his crew do as she says, and they capture Proteus. After court, Proteus explains how everyone met their ends, including Agamemnon. And Menelaus, like the great king he is, weeps on the shores of Egypt for a while. Proteus tells Menelaus that to get home he must sail across the Nile and sacrifice to the gods before being able to get home. So Menelaus starts his own mini-odyssey across the Nile. When he got home, he was overjoyed, but he did have information about Odysseus. He was last known to be on Calypso Island. Gross. We skip to a different time and place, and the suitors have started to plot to kill Telemachus, because they're really charming, you know.
Yeah.
One of Penelope's servants, Melantho, hears about this and informs Penelope, because, you know, they're a good person. And Penelope weeps, surrounded by her servants, and cries about how she didn't know her son was away on his Telemachusy. Sorry about that. Euryclea apologizes to Penelope for not telling her sooner, but Telemachus told her to not tell her for a few days so that he could actually start the Telemachusy. Penelope goes to sleep crying, and Athena, in the form of her sister, who lived far away, told her to have faith in the gods.
I have one question. Why? Why did they miss all of this out in Epic the Musical?
Well, they might not have had enough space to do it.
Well, surely they could have just made, 10,000 more sagas, right?
Sure, buddy. Whatever makes you sleep at night. But you also need to think of how long it will be.
And also one more question. If Nestor, Nestor, he was a king, and kings have kingdoms, so what was his kingdom called again?
I told you this before, Ace. Pylus.
You told me a lot of things earlier, and with my attention span, surely you can't expect me to remember everything.
Question. Who's Proteus?
Proteus is a sea god known for his ability to change shape and for his prophetic powers. Hence why he could tell Menelaus where Odysseus was and what would happen to Agamemnon.
Okay. Final question. So, why didn't Euryclea, tell Penelope that, her son was, gonna leave and, everything?
Oh, you mean the Telemachusy?
Yeah, the Telemachusy, which is... Yeah, the Telemachusy, like a version of the Odyssey.
Yeah. Because Penelope wouldn't have let Telemachus leave if she knew. Let's keep it short. Penelope did not like the Telemachusy.
Oh, that's a shame.
Anyway, sports, that's all we have time for today.
And we hope you had a fantastic, glorious, amazing...
Ace, that's a bit overkill, don't you think?
Absolutely not. Have you not met me?
You two, what did I say about arguing?
Yeah, Ace.
Oh, don't even.
Do my words mean nothing to you? Anyways, we hope you join us next time, where we'll discuss chapter 5 to 6 of the Odyssey. And for those of you wondering, no, I do not know when these two will stop arguing.
Oh my god, I give up.
Just accept it, Ace. Let's say you're a little hot-headed.
How dare you?
LOL!
I never knew that happened. That was really interesting.
Just wait until the next episode where we get into part 3 of the Odyssey.
I can't wait. Right, okay, here we've got a new segment on Joseph Mengele.
Hi, today's episode is chilling. We're diving into the story of Joseph Mengele, the so-called Angel of Death at Auschwitz during World War II. I'm Sarah, your host, and to join me is Pavna and Sophia.
Hi.
Mengele was a doctor, but not the kind who heals. He used his medicine license as a weapon. At Auschwitz, he conducted inhumane experiments, especially on twins, Roma children, and the disabled.
He didn't just experiment, he selected who lived and who died. When new prisoners arrived at Auschwitz, Mengele would stand on the platform, pointing left or right. The prisoners called him the Angel of Death. But what did people who faced him say?
Survivors described his calmness. That was the most terrifying part. He was always well dressed, polite even. He treated people like lab animals. There's a testimony from Eva Moses Kaur, a twin survivor. She described how she and her sister were injected with unknown substances and studied for days.
Mengele's obsession with twins came from his fascination with genetics and racial purity. Oh, by the way, racial purity means two parents must be the same race and the kids will same race as well, and they aren't allowed to mix with another race. He believed he could unlock the secrets of Aryan dominance. So he tortured children in the pursuit of pseudoscience, science based on fake facts.
It raised deep ethical questions. What happened when science is stripped of humanity? Mengele represents how medical knowledge in the wrong hand becomes a tool for cruelty.
And it didn't just end with war. Mengele fled to South America. He escaped justice for decades. Sarah, how did this happen?
With help, former Nazis, sympathetic locals, even elements of the Catholic Church helped him to move through Austria, then Italy, finally to Argentina. He lived under alienations, and despite efforts by Merchant and others, he died in 1979 in Brazil, never captured, never tried.
And that's one of the great injustices. Survivors want answers, families want accountability, but Mengele died a free man.
Which makes remembering his crimes even more important, because it reminds us medicine needs ethics, power needs restraint, and silence is complicity.
And we must never forget that evil can wear a friendly face. That's why we talk about Joseph Mengele, not to dwell in darkness, but to shine a light.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Good Lord, that was a heavy subject.
Interesting, no? And we learn about the good and bad in life, don't we?
Guess so. Now we go on to the final part of the series of the wives of Henry VIII.
Hello everybody. Welcome to the first episode in our 4-part series on some of the most prominent queen consorts in English history.
Everyone knows the story of Henry VIII, famous for his portraits, bloody executions, and of course his 6 wives.
But have you ever considered which one of them had the most tragic life?
Today we are going to discuss the upbringing of each consort and the profound impact that it had in shaping her fate as queen.
It makes the most sense to embark on our historical journey in chronological order. So let's start with wife number 1, Catherine of Aragon. Catherine was born in December 1485 to 2 Spanish monarchs, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabel of Castile. Just aged 4, she was betrothed to Prince Arthur of Wales, solidifying her fate as a political bargaining tool. 10 years later, Catherine left her home country to be married off to Arthur in England, a country with vastly different practices and customs than Spain. Just a few months later, Arthur died, leaving the young Catherine a widow. This disaster commenced a 7-year period of misery in her life, due to a lack of money provided for her care, as well as being isolated from Henry, her new betrothed, and the rest of the court. This period in her life was one of immense uncertainty and struggle.
All of this may be true, but we've got to remember that arranged marriages were a common practice of the time, especially for young girls. So Catherine's status as a political tool did not make her any more of a tragic figure than any other princess of the time. How about her next queen consort?
Well, in terms of a tragic childhood, there's also a lack of subject matter. Anne was born the daughter of Thomas Boleyn and Elizabeth Howard, making her a part of the minor nobility class, most likely in 1501. Anne was sent to the court of Margaret of Austria in 1513 by her father, and then to the French court, where she learned all the skills and manners of a lady at court and formed a close connection to the French royal family.
Well, sounds like she had a privileged upbringing for a woman at the time, thanks to her father's prioritisation of her education and cultural enrichment. Shall we move on to Jane Seymour?
Unfortunately, not much is known of Jane's upbringing, except that she was the eldest daughter of Sir John Seymour as part of a minor gentry family. She grew up at Wolf Hall, also the title of Hilary Mantel's best-selling novel, alongside her 9 siblings. For this reason, it is difficult to judge whether Jane's upbringing was tragic.
Well, perhaps it could be argued that the lack of information surrounding Jane is the very thing that makes her tragic, since her entire legacy is cemented in her status as one of the wives of Henry VIII.
If that's the view you're going to take, then the same could also be applied to our next consort, Anne of Cleves. She was born in 1515, the daughter of the Duke of Cleves. As a girl, she was close to her mother, who oversaw her education. However, unlike the English ladies, she was not taught to dance or play music, leading an extremely pious lifestyle. Apart from this, little else is known of her upbringing.
Arguably, the best example of a tragic childhood is Catherine Howard. Born between 1518 and 1524, she was raised as one of the 10 children of Lord Edmund Howard. After the loss of her mother at a young age, she was raised by her father's stepmother Agnes Tawney, who also housed many other young wards. As young as 12 years old, she was groomed by her music teacher Henry VIII, for which she was punished by the Dowager Duchess despite her failure to guard Catherine's honour as custom dictated. This is just one such example of the Dowager's glaring neglectful tendencies towards Catherine as a child, which certainly hindered her capabilities as a queen, since her education and piety were subpar for the expectations of a Tudor consort.
Well, the tragedy of her life certainly continued into her adolescence. In 1539, where she may have been as young as 15, Catherine's life took a drastic turn when her uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, secured a position for her in the household of Anne of Cleves. As soon as Henry's waning interest with Anne of Cleves was known to the court, it is highly likely that her power-hungry family pushed her into the path of Henry VIII. Yet another example of adults manipulating her for their own gain. You can't argue much against that.
Yes, unfortunately for Catherine, I think that's true. In that case, let's move on to our final contender, Catherine Parr. Catherine was born around August 1512 to Matilda Green and Sir Thomas Parr, and had just 2 younger siblings. Both of her parents were prominent figures in the Tudor court, with her father serving as a close courtier to Henry VIII, and her mother serving as lady-in-waiting to Catherine of Aragon. However, in 1517, tragedy struck when her father died, leaving her widowed mother to bring up the children alone.
True, but her mother was an enlightened woman who valued female education, providing Catherine with important practical skills, particularly in languages, that many of the young ladies of the time would not have been able to obtain, giving her the tools to become the first woman in England to publish a book under her own name.
That's an excellent achievement, certainly. However, it could be argued that her father's was the first in a series of deaths in her immediate family. By the early 1530s, Catherine had lost both her mother and her first husband, living as a young, poor widow. After the death of her second husband, in 1543, Catherine received a proposal from Henry, forcing her to put aside her great love for Sir Thomas Seymour. Heartbreakingly tragic, one might argue.
Wow, we've discussed a lot in this episode.
The standout for me was definitely Catherine Howard. Her childhood and adolescent years seemed to be a complete tragedy from start to finish. Her family, who ought to have been the most reliable figures in her life, consistently exploiting her for their own gain.
I'd have to agree with you here, although we mustn't ignore the common denominator here, the tragedy of being a woman in Tudor England. Each and every one of his wives, and all women in this period for that matter, were victims of a deeply patriarchal society, demanding that they submit fully to the men in their lives. This is reflected most clearly in the countless women who have been lost to history, rendered insignificant, a fate which likely affected Henry's wives if not for their marriage to him.
On that gloomy note, thank you for listening. See you next time.
Well, that was a lot.
Poor Catherine Howard.
I was going to start singing the Horrible History song, but I feel like this deserves more respect.
Even though this episode was quite sad, I hope you've all taken something from it. Thank you so much for listening.
Bye!